did you reach, I presume, via the influence of the youth movement, Habonim, how did you decide that this place here, this site of Kfar Nasi, would be your kibbutz?
Right, that was very, very popular decision. we had a thing called the Garin,
Settlement group.
A settlement group in England, which I was then the secretary of. We set it up. We had 160 names on who were written down to come on the Aliyah to Israel.
Yeah.
Truth is, not all 160 came. That's quite nachon. But over 100 came to settle on the kibbutz. Which kibbutz and what kibbutz, I have to tell you. We were on Mayan Tzvi on Hakshara, on training. We went to Mayan Tzvi to train. I came on Aliyah, joined the group in Mayan Tzvi. There were people there who you probably knew, people called Peretz Nadel, Dawn Nadel, trying to think of the names which you probably remember. Shimon Schenkesicht was there, Dot Schenkesicht. They were people living at the time in Mayan Tzvi. I came, then I was a masker, but I saw it was a complete and utter waste of time. They were not learning Hebrew, they were learning German, if any language at all. That's what we spoke in Mayan Tzvi. They learned about fishing, which in bananas. That was about all, but they
fishing, because Mayan Tzvi is on the Mediterranean coast.
Yeah, they had a big fish ones and they had a lot of bananas. Mm-hmm. That's where everybody worked, more or less. But they didn't do any form of formation of a garin. They had a madrich, a shaliach, it was called.
An envoy, a leader.
But it was very, very tragic. And I decided then the time has come to find a place to settle down and not mess around. I went to the Sochnut,
to the Jewish agency.
The Jewish agency in those days.
Yeah.
And I said, look, we want to settle somewhere in the country. We would like to go south. Our motto was, hey, Deroma, let's go south.
To the Negev desert.
The Negev.
So conquer the barren country.
That was it. That was the big idea. So I got to the Sochnut, and the bloke in charge of the
settlement department
says, you want to go to the Negev?
To the
Englishman? He says, you'll live there 2 weeks, and that's it. You won't live anymore. You can't go to the Negev. You have to go to the north, to the Galil. So he told me this story, which I accepted at the time, I couldn't. And he gave me 4 names. He said, you can go to Tel Katzir.
By the Syrian.
You go to Ha'on, and don't forget the Syrians were right above them at the time.
On what was the Syrian Heights, which is now the Golan Heights.
So you go to Tel Katzir, you can go to Ha'on, Bet Emek, or Kfar Nasi. Came with the 4 kibbutzim. I decided to send a mishloach.
Delegation.
A delegation, which happened to be me and my wife. And we went to Tel Katzir, and I think we got through the gate, and that was enough. We came out. That's not for us. Ha'on, similar.
Ha'on is next to Tel Katzir.
Next to the river, next to the
lake.
Next
to the lake, yeah.
But also close to Syria in those days.
Below the Syrian gun emplacements.
So we decided, not for Jewish boys. And we went to Bet Emek. Bet Emek was then covered mainly with our madrachim, with our leaders that we grew up with. And people like Freddie Khan and Ninir. And they were very well. They received us very nicely. They were a bit intellectual, in our opinion, at the time, because they were all of them, some sort of professional. And we decided, not quite sure, we'll go to Kfar Nasi and check. We went to Kfar Nasi, and who met us? A bloke called Gershie Epstein was there, and then Shmuel Katzo, and Michael Duare. And they all told us stories about living on the kibbutz. They made life very, very comfortable for us. Cup of tea on the table, straight away. Cup of nice English tea on the table. And Edna and I says, you know what? this looks more like the right thing for us.
Okay, let me ask you. So, when you came to Kvanasi, what was here at that time? What year was that?
The year was we came in 1950, came in Aliyah in 57, 58. There was nothing here. There were a few houses.
Kvanasi was actually established when?
48.
48, okay.
They built houses
No,
which...
but where Kvanasi was established in Mansoura.
Oh, no, yeah, sorry, he's quite right. Kvanasi was established down by the Jordan.
Not quite
In
by
the Jordan Gorge below.
a former Arab village,
Yeah, but it's called
Mansoura.
Mansoura, yeah.
Yeah.
It was called
Which is just
Mansoura.
below, you can see the trees.
So Mansoura was an abandoned village from the 1948
Not
war.
from 1948 war.
No.
It was during the British period.
Way before.
They didn't abandon it. They abandoned it way before for completely different reasons.
No. There were just bits and pieces left.
Yeah.
We came, Vatikim, the senior members of the kibbutz, settled there in Mansoura, and they began to, make a life there. We had a laundry there. We had a mifal. We had
A factory.
We had a gentleman called Joe Sinner, who was an engineer in Tassia, in the metal industry, and we set up a small business in metal. Those in Mansoura.
As a metal workshop.
Yeah, very small.
Aluminium.
Eh?
Aluminium.
Aluminium. Yeah, well, it was aluminium, by the way. It wasn't metal. It's
Using
quite
old
right.
aeroplanes, crashed aeroplanes as
it was
raw
only-
material.
And we set it up there, and more or less after, I don't know how long we were in Mansoura, a year and a half, maybe 2, we came up.
We weren't in Mansoura.
No, we weren't, no.
No, you're talking about us.
I'm
We
talking
were
about
not there.
I'm talking about the Vatikim, the senior members.
The,
They were there for 2 years.
The veterans.
And we came already, they come up here on the hill, and you asked me what there was. There were houses, 8 houses there, which was Kibbutz Hamachad in those days. There was one school, Gan Shaked. There was a wooden srif, which was a nursing home.
A wooden hut.
And then there was a wooden building which was a dining room, a wooden building, dining room. And that's what was there when we came. And we worked on that.
Any air conditioners or televisions?
Oh,
What did we do? I think we lived in a wooden hut. We used to put a sheet with water on the window, and I put a fan on the sheet so the cold air in. That was the air conditioning. We had no air conditioning. We had nothing at all. The children's houses had no air conditioning.
Okay. Aryeh, what year did you arrive in Kvanasi?
right. Well,
Well,
I
how
have
did
to
you-
give you
Yes.
a bit of a background. Alec came all right, let's put it this way. There was a Garin formed. A Garin was the
Settlement group.
settlement group.
Got in hay.
No, while I was on the training farm, it was the Garin Gimel that
Amiyad.
went eventually to Amiyad. They were in Gal Ed on Hachshara, and they eventually landed up in Amiyad, which was Hachoshlim in those days. Now, after I was on the training farm, in 1952, I was sent to Israel on the Machon LeMadrichei Chutz La'aretz, the Youth Leaders Institute of the Jewish Agency, for a year in Jerusalem. And there we studied intensively subjects, the Jewish history, Zionism, and of course Hebrew. That's basically where I learned to speak Hebrew. And we were there for 5 months. And then we went over to work on a senior kibbutz, and the kibbutz that we worked on was Ramat Yochanan,
in
which
the
was
Haifa Bay
in the
district.
Haifa Bay district, and we worked there very hard in the fields. We were, they were not used to strangers joining them, youngsters like us, and they exploited us.
English.
So we were there for 3 months, and then we went to the Hachoshlim, where Garin Gimel was, and this was my Garin. This was my
So
settlement group.
that settlement group, which became settled in
Right.
Hashlim, which became
That's
the
right,
Amiyad,
Amiyad.
my brother was also in it.
Okay, so I was there, and this was my future place for future settlement. I then went back to England. We were obliged to do 2 years movement work. In my case, I did 4 years movement work, 2 years in Leeds and 2 years in Liverpool. And then I came on Aliyah in 1958, the end of 1958. Now, while I was on movement work, I lost contact with the Garin Gimel, and I then made contact with Garin Hay, which was
the big Garin.
was the Garin at the time, and that's how I came to Garin Hay, which brought me to Kfar Hanassi. And I came to Kfar Hanassi in 1958 after I did movement work, 4 years of movement work.
I want to
Did
say,
you, before you were out, well, when you were out, did you already know Alec?
I didn't know Alec, but I do remember in 1951 a conference in Tyringham House of Habonim.
yeah, Jesus.
Yeah, and it was a big conference, and it was Alec who was the symbol of the formation of Garin Hay. Why was it called Garin Hay and not Garin Dalad? Because when it was announced the establishment of the new Garin, everybody said, hey, hey, hey. And Alec didn't know his alphabet in Hebrew, and he accepted hey. And that's how he got Garin Hay. And Alec was the...
Later, I'll tell you stories about myself not knowing Hebrew.
yeah, so that's why we Garin Hay,
So
not Garin
just
Dalad.
for the
I just
people...
have to add to that story because Aryeh won't like it, but it doesn't matter. Why we were at Tillingham House, I invested there. There were lots of girls there, Habonim girls who we all got involved with. One of them was called Simcha, who was in charge of cooking.
Okay.
And
Simcha, the word Simcha in Hebrew means to rejoice,
she
to
was
be happy.
very important. She was a good cook and she cooked the whole place. And Aryeh, for some reason or other, I don't know why, overheard, what was that, conversation with her? Saw her getting dressed or undressed. Something about conversation with her. And he came to the rest of the boys there, to tell a story about Simcha, well. But she happened to be in the room next door, and she heard every word. And when she heard the Aryeh, she came out afterwards. Aryeh got what was called a plucking to plucking, and he got the full blow.
I think you got more of it.
Yeah, well, I got a lot as well.
I see.
But she wanted to get to Aryeh more than me. I don't know why.
Okay.
But you got a blow out from her.
Okay, so you got a blast from her, and you weren't
that was why we came
you weren't
earlier.
sent to hospital or anything. Oh no.
I just have to mention the fact that when we came on Aliyah, and Aryeh, I think, touched on it, we went to the Hakshara to learn to be farmers. The idea being, when we came to the country, as I said, farming in England got nothing to do with farming in this country. I don't think there was very much benefit by it. Anyway, I never went on Hakshara because I was on movement work all the time and I was busy doing movement work. So when I came to the country, I came to Kwanasi and we decided to take Kwanasi. That was the decision. And then we came to settle on the Kibbutz. This was in 58. We came to settle on the Kibbutz. And the farm manager at the time said to me, Alec, What do you do? I said, well, I'm an engineer. I want to do engineering. My mind was building houses, dining room, theatre. He says, no, first you have to do a bit of farming. You're actually living on a kibbutz. You can't do I know you're an engineer and I know you're very capable, but we want you to work on a farm. So I was a very good boy at the time, I didn't know, and I said, okay, right, we'll send you on the first job, fish ponds. Now I knew fish from a book, what I knew fish ponds meant, but there's a bloke called Yochanan, very intelligent bloke, by the way, very bright bloke. But he says, okay, Alec, we get up at 4:30. That was my first job. And I went to bed at 4:30, and I get up at 4:30. I had to get up at 4:30, and we went to the fish ponds. Huge ponds. And he says, look, Alec, what have we done? We've drawn a net. They pulled a net through the pools and caught all the fish they could catch, but a lot of the fish got away. A lot, 30, 40. And these fish are called carp, and they're about that big, 30, huge, and heavy and slippy. He said, now you catch them and put them in the net. That was my job.
I see.
Now, I've never seen a fish, apart from Friday night on the table when my mother made nice fish for supper.
Or fish
I've
and
never,
chips.
never seen a fish alive, let alone in the water. And I went in this water, and these fish were running around between my legs, and I grabbed one, of course, it shot in the air, and I grabbed it, and it shot. I spent the whole day, I caught 12 fish. 12 I caught. And I put them in the net, and Yochanan says, very good, he says, very good. I wasn't impressed by that. And I came back home, and I went to the manager farm. I said, look, this agriculture business, but fish ponds is not my line. He says, okay, don't worry, we have to have ready for you another job, just waiting for you. And they had what was called in those days chickens. But the chickens run round the open area. And he says, we're catching the chickens, put them in clothing, put them in cages, sent to market. You have to catch it. 4 in this hand, 4 in that hand, and then you run down to the end and they put them into the cage. Now I want you to know, chickens may be nice looking animals, but they bite. And you get 4 on your hands, you get nipped there. Well. I did that for the whole day. And at the end of the day, I was chickened. And they said to me, Alec, don't worry, we have a big surprise for you at the end, a lovely big dinner. I says, what is it? He says, nice, lovely chicken. I says, thank you very much. That was the end of my chicken days. And I decided that's not for me, not chickens and not fish. And I can carry on. Never
All
mind.
right. Those were the early days of Kfar Anasi. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take a little break. We'll stop here, and then we'll go into another subject entirely about your life in Kfar Anasi now as older members.
Well, I would like to compare it.
Okay, all right.
Because
Last
I had
word
a
to
very
Aryeh on
different
this.
experience from
Okay.
Alec. I was a bachelor. Alec was a married man
He's having a good laugh here.
I know.
and I'm not sure you had already
I know what's coming.
children. Yeah, I was a bachelor, and I was together with other bachelors that were together with me that came from the movement, and our life was sleep, eat, and work. We got up in the morning at 5:30, 5 o'clock, 5:30, worked till 4, 5 in the afternoon, and very often when we finished work in the fields, we were on Toronot to unload trucks.
On a
From
rota
time to
system.
time, that's right. And that was our life. Now, the accent on those days was on children, families with children, and they had a life. And the bachelors' social life, there were no girls here.
So why did you stay?
we were in denial because we came to kibbutz, and we were educated to believe in the kibbutz,
I like the word
and
denial.
therefore we suffered this. Eventually, I found my way, and others did as well. Also, I'd just like to say the bus used to rock up on a Friday, and we used to stand by the bus stop to see if there were any girls that got off the bus for the weekend. And I found I have friends in Jerusalem, and I remember finishing a shift on the tractor, which I started at 4 o'clock in the morning. I finished at 12 in the afternoon. This is on a Friday. My friend in Jerusalem invited me to an all-night party in his basement. I finished work. I ran home, ran back to the wooden hut, and I went to the public shower. Had a quick shower and got changed. And I ran and I hitchhiked to Rosh Pina, and from then I hitchhiked all the way to Jerusalem. And I got to Jerusalem about 6 or 7 o'clock in the evening, and spent the night at the party. And that's where I met my wife.
Oh, well, all's well that ends
We
well.
are now a family of 5 children and 12 grandchildren.
And by the way, what I haven't mentioned to the people watching this channel, that you are not only friends, but you are in-laws, I think.
As it
That is
happens,
right.
yes,
That's
yes,
right.
yes.
So-
Because
My daughter married his son.
I want you to know that was a very successful marriage, by the way. But my problem started with I was living with my wife for a couple of years on movement work. We worked in the movement. I told you, I was the Scouts and she was the German. And we lived together even then. Before we left the kibbutz, we got married officially in a very nice hall. Where we all got
Not
married.
before you left the kibbutz.
Yeah, just before we
came
left.
to the
Just
kibbutz.
before we came to kibbutz.
You
Yeah.
said before we left.
Sorry. Before we came to the kibbutz,
Thank you.
we had a big wedding in London, which our parents wanted. We didn't. Our parents wanted. And I remember I had a top hat and a tails and, the whole geschäft. Now, people that know me know I like to act. I like to perform. And this top hat was perfect for me. I had a top hat, I would come on, with the top hat. My wife says, take the top hat off, and if you put it on again, the end of our marriage. Short marriage, but that's the end of it. So I took out my hat off, and I went into the hall, and afterwards, and I never wore it again, because that was my life. I was dying to put it on and, do a little dance.
Yeah.
But what I wanted to mention was that we got married in a proper, what our parents thought was a proper affair, in a synagogue, and we got perfectly well married, and then we came ready to come on Aliyah, and I think that perhaps one of the biggest, I would say, challenges to my life was leaving England and coming on Aliyah to those days we didn't know, we went to Mine 3. We didn't know where we were going. I think that was one of the biggest challenges of my life. Fortunately, I was married, so I had a wife. Aryeh was not married when he had it on his own, but I was married, so I was, like Aryeh said, I was lucky. And we had a child very quickly. So I had, much easier for me to settle on the kibbutz.
Another question. You said it was a challenge for you. Was that because you were a Leeds football supporter?
What was the
Did you
question?
feel bad about leaving Leeds and
I
coming
see,
to
I
Leeds?
see.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was very upset about leaving a good team. And my wife was from Everton,
I see.
so she was a very good supporter. No, that didn't bother me worrying about
Okay,
football.
We'll take a break here. Aryeh, you want to say something else?
Yeah, well, I was not. I wasn't 100% complete with being on the kibbutz, and one of the reasons was that I didn't have a profession. I was working in the fields, although I was in charge of the branch growing wheat, but it was hard work and shifts, night shifts, and Shabbatot we used to work at weekends, and it wasn't a life.
For a Jewish boy.
Yeah. Eventually, I was sent as a shaliach to South Africa.
As an envoy,
As an envoy, to South Africa for 2 years, and I saw the world again as it was, the world that I left, and I was back there, and I was the leader because I was representing Israel, and I enjoyed a completely different status. Mm-hmm. I wasn't just one of the many as I was here, equality, etc., and to be nothing more than, a bird Wolfin. There I was, the kibbutz representative and the envoy to Habonim, and it was just after the 6-day war. So that injected in me the need to go further and to develop myself. I came back, and I wanted a change, and then the war broke out. The Yom Kippur War broke out.
In 1973.
Now this is the interesting. I read 2 interesting books while I was in the army. I was called up for 6 months. I was fighting on the Golan Heights, and at the end of the war, I continued to be mobilized for another 3 months. And during that period, I had time to read, which I did. And one of the books was The Third Wave by Alvin Toffler, where he foresees a change in the world on the background of high-tech and computers and technology, etc., and the world is going to change. What we did now, or many of us who have professions, those professions will not be required any further, and we have to think of change. And the second book I read was by a psychologist, Amir Lieblich. She did a research on how families were feeling on the kibbutz today in a changing world. I'm talking about 1973. Mm-hmm. And she interviewed 20 families in kibbutz Tel Katzir. I think it was Tel Katzir, maybe not Tel Katzir, Ein Charod. And she published this book based on these interviews. And reading these interviews, you could see that there was going to be change on the kibbutz. That it was not the usual, it wasn't the usual what kibbutznikim would talk about. It was something else. And then I said, Aryeh, I've got to take myself in hand and also make a change. When I came out of the army, they heard in the area high school that I'm looking for another job, and they invited me to be a teacher. I said, what do I know? I left England before I started university. No, he said, you were a farmer, you drove a tractor, you can teach tractor driving. Or you can teach, you were a shaliach, something you can teach. I accepted it. I found that I was a teacher. I had the qualities of being a teacher. And I set up a project where every child, every pupil in Kita Yud, was it 16-year-olds?
The 16-year-olds.
16-year-olds. At the end of the year, each one had received a tractor license. where he passed the test in theory and practice. And I taught them all how to drive and also taught them theory, etc. From that led me on to go to university, which the Ministry of Education covers the cost of university studies for teachers. And
so not just the kibbutz, but
no, generally, on condition they continue teaching. And I finished a BA and an MA in history and political science, and then I became a history teacher and a teacher for Ezrachot and political science. Today, I am teaching seniors in the local area council, and I'm teaching them history and current events, current affairs and political science. I'm doing it to this day.
fantastic. All right.
I want to just continue. I want just to add to his story, which is quite, we were quite friends by then. So I knew what was going on. I was fortunate enough to study before I came on Aliyah, and I got my degree in engineering in England already. So I came as an engineer, professional. So even though when I came to the kibbutz was not interested in me going straight into engineering. He wanted me to work on a farm, and I told you the story about the fish and the chickens and The end was, the person in charge of building on the kibbutz met a girl from America, and he decided to give it a go and go live in America and get a green card. And he went and to the kibbutz and said, look, I'm afraid the bloke in charge of building is going there. Here you, and would like you to take over. I said, it'd be a pleasure. It'd be a pleasure. I said, okay. I said to the bloke, who was called Gabriel, yeah. I said, Gabriel, okay, where's your office? And he brought out a little suitcase, the size of this thing. But not mine, this thing. He says, that's my office. I opened it up. Bits of paper and notes and thing. He says, that's it.
What year was that?
And that was in 1958, 59 probably, 59.
Mm-hmm.
And I became then in charge of building in Quantity, which I carried on to this day. I never stopped being in charge of building. I was fortunate enough, like Aryeh says, he was also fortunate enough later on in my life, when the kibbutz was in financial stress, as always. Shmuel Chatzor, again, was the manager of the kibbutz, and he says, Alec, building is very good on the kibbutz, it's very expensive. We can't afford you to have. You're going to have to work out. And they sent me to the county council, and I became the engineer for the county council, and which was very good for me. I enjoyed that very much. I was there for 11 years, and I was responsible for 29 kibbutzim, 13 moshavim, all the building and planning of all those. I did that for 11 years, which was very, very nice. I think that was probably one of the most successful feelings I had about studying in England before I came on Aliyah. Mm-hmm. I think that paid me back for what doing. Like Aryeh said, he came later on, but eventually he got to getting a degree, and when he got it, he appreciated the fact that he had a degree, and I was lucky to have it from the very beginning.
And what you built here in Kfar Hanassi, I know that, for example, Kfar Hanassi was one of the first kibbutzim to build a combination of a community center and a dining room, yeah, which you opened in
1964.
Yes.
Yeah. That was my...
Which became an example for many other kibbutzim, which in all of the kibbutzim, just the dining room
of Hagashat Smith,
self-service.
Self-service where before that we sat in the dining room. We were served Toranim. What's
by people on duty taking turns to serve and work in the dining room.
And now, and we sat at the table and we were served. Now it was something completely new.
A big change, 1964, self-service.
But I would.
We're taking another break here. The third part of this conversation will be uploaded in episode 11. It deals with how the foreign volunteer movement started as a result of the impending outbreak of the Six-Day War in 1967. Both Alec and Aryeh were envoys, representatives of the Kibbutz movement. Together they interviewed thousands of volunteers, and this is your chance to contact me and share your volunteer stories. That's it for now. I'm waiting to hear from you. Don't forget to subscribe and share my blog with your family and friends. Shalom and lehitraot.